A man named Dr. Gerhard Koenig had spent weeks researching the Palapuka Trail in Oahu before taking a birthday trip there with his wife, Ariel. The trail was steep and narrow, running along an exposed ridge with a dangerous drop on one side. What started as a normal hike quickly turned into something violent. According to court evidence and body cam footage, Ariel was later seen bloodied and struggling down the trail with two witnesses who had heard her screaming. She testified that after an argument about their marriage, Gerhard attacked her on the trail, trying to force her toward the cliff edge. When that failed, she said he used a rock to strike her repeatedly after she blocked an attempted syringe injection. Two nearby hikers intervened, which forced him to flee into the surrounding terrain, triggering a large search operation. He was later arrested and eventually convicted of attempted manslaughter. A man named Dave took a photo on March 23, 2026, while walking through the woods with a friend. He had recently gotten a new Packard Bell digital camera and decided to test it out during the walk. Throughout the day, they took several photos of the trees and surrounding forest. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but later, while reviewing the images, they noticed something strange in one of the photos. If you zoom in to the main tree trunk, a face-like shape appears to be staring out from the bark. The more they looked at it, the more human it seemed. According to Dave, neither he nor his friend could explain how the shape had appeared. Of course, there's a very common explanation for things like this. Our brains are naturally wired to recognize familiar patterns, especially faces, even when they're not actually there. Combined with the texture of the bark, shadows, and lighting, it's entirely possible that the image is simply an example of pareidolia. A TikToker named Lacey Kratz filmed an incident on April 11, 2023, while running a familiar 3-mile route. At first, she noticed a man on the trail behind her and didn't think much of it.
This gentleman was ahead of me at one point.
But when she looked back later, he was further behind than expected, as if he had slowed down to keep distance rather than pass her.
Oh yeah, he's running.
She continued running, but even after crossing the road to create more space, she noticed he was still there and seemed to adjust his pace to match hers. At that point, she started recording and began testing the situation by changing speed and direction. Each time she ran faster, he also sped up. When she slowed, he adjusted again. She ended her run early after she felt like she was being followed the entire time. Have you ever experienced something like this? A person was hiking along a shaded forest trail when the path suddenly turned into something straight out of a nightmare. Everywhere they looked, spiderwebs. Webs stretched across the ground, hanging between trees and covering large sections of the trail ahead. The further they looked, the more webs they seemed to notice. Not wanting to walk through them, the hiker decided to turn around. If I saw that many spiderwebs covering a trail, I'd probably start reconsidering my hike too. But now I'm curious, would you have kept going? TikTok user Janin Ura was hiking at night at a place filled with crosses stretching in every direction. As they walked through the area, they recorded the scene. With the fog hanging in the air, the scene felt incredibly unsettling. Naturally, many viewers who saw the footage assumed the location was abandoned or connected to something sinister. But surprisingly, that wasn't the case at all. The site was actually the famous Hill of Crosses in Lithuania, a well-known pilgrimage destination where people have been placing crosses for generations as symbols of faith, remembrance, and resilience. During the day, it's a popular religious and historical landmark visited by people from around the world. But the combination of the darkness, the fog, and thousands of silent crosses standing in every direction makes the place feel far creepier than it probably would in daylight. A man was walking near the edge of a forest close to a graveyard when, from the direction of the graveyard, loud screams and screeching noises suddenly echoed through the area. Nearby dogs began barking and howling in response. Holy. The commotion continued for a short while before suddenly stopping. The man said the sudden shift from chaos to silence felt even more unsettling than the noises themselves. Even though it was most likely just wildlife, the abrupt silence was strange. This person, known on TikTok as un lugar oscuro, went hiking at night with only a flashlight to guide the way. As he followed the dark trail, he suddenly heard something ahead of him and decided to start recording. At first, it was difficult to make out what was in front of him, but then the beam of his flashlight revealed something unsettling. A figure crouched low to the ground. It appeared to be wearing a white gown and had long dark hair. The man stopped, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then, suddenly, the figure crawled toward him with incredible speed before stopping just a few feet away.
What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?
At that point, the man's panic was obvious. You could hear him breathing heavily as he backed away from whatever was standing in front of him. The clip ends shortly afterward, without revealing what happened next. Of course, videos like this are easy to stage online. But if it was real, what exactly did he encounter on that trail that night? 20-year-old Auburn University student James Weston Higginbotham traveled to Japan with his family in May 2026 to celebrate his younger brother's high school graduation. After arriving in Japan on May 22nd, the family spent several days exploring the country before reaching Kyoto. But on the evening of May 29th, things took a tragic turn. According to reports, Weston became separated from his parents after a family disagreement and decided to continue exploring on his own. For a while, his family was able to follow some of his movements through a location-sharing app. Authorities later confirmed that he had been seen boarding a train and getting off at Yamashina Station in Kyoto. Then, suddenly, his phone stopped transmitting a signal. Calls and messages no longer went through, and nobody knew where he had gone. A large search effort quickly began, with family members, volunteers, and local authorities all trying to find him. As the days passed, concern continued to grow. Then, about a week later, a volunteer search and rescue team made a heartbreaking discovery. Weston was found in a mountainous area outside Kyoto. In a statement released afterward, his mother, Nancy Higginbotham, thanked everyone who had helped search for her son and described him as someone who loved nature, adventure, family, and friends. At the time, officials had released very few details about exactly what happened, though reports stated that no foul play was suspected. Weston was only 20 years old. A trail camera in Tennessee captured some unexpected footage. A monkey moving through the woods. The unusual part wasn't the animal itself, but the location. Tennessee isn't home to any native monkey species, making the sighting highly unusual. Some suggested it was likely an escaped pet that had wandered into the wild, something that has occasionally happened in other parts of the United States. Others worried it may have been intentionally released and left to survive on its own. The footage doesn't provide any clear answers about where it came from or what happened to it afterward. But imagine checking your trail camera and finding this. Wouldn't you be confused? On May 31st, 2026, Instagram user May K. Leo was at his rural property in Campo Largo near Curitiba, Brazil, when he noticed something unusual in the sky. May K., a content creator known for animal rescue videos with no prior interest in UFOs, began filming what he described as a massive eye-shaped object hovering above a ridge in the distance. Beneath it appeared to be a red sphere. According to him, the object was far too large to be a drone, displayed multiple colored lights, and made no sense from his perspective. What makes the case particularly interesting is what happened afterward. May K. later drew the object and the surrounding landscape from memory. When compared to satellite imagery of the location, many people noticed the sketch appeared to match the terrain visible on Google Maps. Since sharing the footage, he has claimed to experience strange sounds coming from the nearby forest, instability on his social media accounts, death threats, and even sightings of mysterious cars parked outside his home with men dressed in black inside. Whether you believe his story or not, the reported match between the sketch and the satellite view has become one of the most discussed parts of the case. Here's the coordinates, if you want to look it up yourself. On October 22, 2024, police responded to a report on the Portage County hike and bike trail in Ravenna, Ohio, after a passerby found a man who had been stabbed.
Put it down! Put it down!
Officers were treating the victim when a second man walked out of the nearby woods. He was carrying both an axe and a knife. Despite repeated commands to stop and drop the weapons, he continued walking directly toward the officers. When he got too close, officers opened fire. The man was later identified as 43-year-old Matthew James Fry and was pronounced dead at the scene. The victim survived and told investigators the attack had been unprovoked. Authorities later confirmed Fry had prior contact with law enforcement and a history of violent offences, but there was no active warning at the time. The trail was briefly closed and later reopened. Incidents like this prove that sometimes the most dangerous encounters outdoors aren't wildlife, but other people. A group of hikers ventured into a forested area at night with flashlights and cameras. As they moved deeper along the trail, they noticed something bright beneath a tree in the distance. Something was standing there, wearing what looked like a white wedding dress. It didn't move at all, until it did. The group froze as the figure slowly turned towards them, staring from a distance. After a few seconds, it turned away and began walking off into the trees. The hikers stayed where they were, unsure what they had just seen. This group of people quickly started recording after a strange spherical object reportedly crashed in a rural area of Indonesia. According to reports, locals heard a loud boom echo through the area before discovering something unusual in an open field. Partially buried in the ground was a large metallic-looking sphere. The object's appearance immediately drew attention from nearby residents. Some believed it was likely space debris, possibly part of a satellite or rocket component that had fallen back to Earth. Others pointed to its unusual shape and questioned whether it could be something far less ordinary. As news of the discovery spread, the rumors only became stranger. Some claimed the object had been removed by the military shortly after it was found. Others insisted it remained with local villagers. But despite the stories circulating online, none of those claims could be independently verified. A woman from Drachten in the Netherlands went searching for her daughter's missing parrot after it escaped from home. After looking around the neighbourhood, she finally spotted the bird sitting high up in a tree. Relieved to have found it, she began calling for it to come down, but the parrot refused to move. Hoping for help, she contacted the animal ambulance and firefighters. Unfortunately, neither group was able to safely reach the bird. Frustrated and determined to bring it home, the woman decided to climb the tree herself. But the higher she climbed, the more difficult the situation became. Eventually she realized she couldn't reach the parrot, and worse, she was now too high up to safely climb back down. Her friends were forced to call the fire brigade once again. After being stuck in the tree for around an hour and a half, firefighters finally rescued her. But the story wasn't over yet. Using a platform lift, the firefighters made another attempt to reach the parrot. This time, it worked. The woman was able to accompany them, and the bird eventually allowed her to grab it safely. Thankfully, both the woman and the parrot made it back to the ground unharmed. And, in the end, her daughter was finally reunited with her beloved pet. A 60-year-old man named Jason Cochran went missing while hiking in California's Desolation Wilderness near Lake Tahoe over Memorial Day weekend. On May 25, 2026, Jason set out alone from the Fallen Leaf Lake area, planning to hike through one of the most rugged and remote wilderness regions in the Sierra Nevada. The last confirmed sighting of him placed him near Angora Peak at around 11 a.m. Later that afternoon, around 4 p.m., he made his final known contact. Then, he seemingly vanished. When Jason failed to return as expected, concern quickly grew. Authorities launched a large search operation involving ground teams, aircraft, and search and rescue personnel covering miles of difficult terrain. But despite extensive efforts, no immediate trace of him was found. And honestly, that's what makes cases like this so unsettling. At the time of the reports, search efforts were still ongoing and no one knew exactly what happened to him. If you're in the Lake Tahoe area and have any information that could help locate Jason Cochran, authorities ask you that you contact local law enforcement or the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. A man was standing on a highland overlooking a river when he noticed movement near the water's edge. He started filming and zoomed in. There appeared to be a dark humanoid figure. It almost looked like someone wearing a long robe, but its shape seemed unusually dark and difficult to make out. According to the man, it appeared almost semi-transparent, like a shadow moving on its own, darker than anything else in the surrounding environment. Some people describe similar sightings as shadow people, dark human-like forms that are often reported to appear briefly before disappearing without explanation. But I'm not entirely convinced. Couldn't it simply be a person with a strange appearance caused by distance, lighting conditions, and camera quality? What do you think? A hiker recorded this clip showing a disc-shaped craft hovering over the ocean near a forest line. It moved smoothly across the horizon, with no visible wings, rotors, or propulsion system. He insisted the footage was authentic, claiming there was no editing or AI involved. But do we really believe that? On September 6, 2021, 3-year-old Anthony A.J. Elfalak went missing from his family's rural property near Putty, New South Wales, Australia. A.J., who is non-verbal and has autism, disappeared during the morning, triggering a large-scale search across the surrounding bushland. For 3 days, police, SCS volunteers, and family members searched the rugged terrain with no sign of him. Conditions were difficult, and search teams even walked close to where he was without spotting him. Then, on the 4th day, a police helicopter spotted something near a creek, about 470 meters from his home. AJ was found alive, sitting in shallow water and drinking from the creek with his hands. Rescue crews were directed in by the helicopter and reached him shortly after. Despite surviving 3 nights alone in the bush, he was in relatively good condition, suffering only minor injuries such as ant bites and scrapes. Authorities later explained that his survival was likely due to access to water from the creek, which allowed him to stay hydrated during his time alone in the wilderness. After being carried out of the bush, AJ was reunited with his family and taken to hospital for checks. A TikToker named Bleeding Rose 82 was hiking in the woods of New Jersey when she stopped and started recording. A bird was sitting calmly on what looked like a tree branch, only the branch wasn't connected to anything. It appeared to be floating in midair. At first she assumed it had to be an illusion or hidden support, but as she moved the camera around, nothing explained it. The bird didn't seem bothered at all, just sitting there like it was completely normal. By the end of the clip, she could only describe it as something unnatural, calling it a fade trap, referencing old folklore about strange formations meant to mislead people in the woods. Whatever it was, the branch stayed perfectly still in empty space. She never found an explanation, and when she returned to the same spot days later, the branch wasn't there anymore. At least she had the footage to know she wasn't imagining it. On April 28, 2026, 62-year-old Australian woman Denise Ann Williams went missing after setting out on a solo hiking trip in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. She last contacted her family on April 15th, saying she was heading to the Chetty Camp area. She was reported missing on April 28th. Her rental car was later found near the Parks Canada Visitor Centre at the start of the Acadian Trail inside Cape Breton Highlands National Park. A large search followed, involving multiple search and rescue teams, covering the surrounding trails and rugged terrain. After 6 days of searching with no results, the operation was suspended on May 3rd. She was last seen wearing a dark jacket, a blue knitted hat with Antarctica written on it, and an orange and blue scarf and glasses. As of the latest reports, there have been no confirmed sightings or major updates, and the case remains open. So if you've been around the area recently and noticed anything that stood out, or if you're planning to visit the area, make sure to keep your eyes open. A Reddit user named DawnX Blackheart was hiking with a friend about 6 years ago when they suddenly noticed a strong, rotting smell drifting through the trees. They followed it to the edge of a sewage pipe deep in the woods, and that's when they saw this. A massive pile of dead fish. But what made it even more disturbing wasn't just the smell or the quantity. Some of the fish were scattered in places they shouldn't have reached, including up in the branches of nearby trees. At first, they thought it might be a strange dumping site or runoff from a nearby water system, but nothing about the scene really made sense. A woman named Jaslinda Saludin joined a hiking group on Malaysia's Gunung Batu Peti Trail as part of a challenging mountain trek. The hike began in the early hours of May 23, 2026, with Jaslinda, 13 other participants, and 2 mountain guides setting out on the route. As the trek continued through difficult terrain, Jaslinda and another hiker reportedly began experiencing health problems and had to stop along the way. Despite feeling unwell, she chose to continue toward the summit while the rest of the group pushed ahead. The following morning, May 24th, a mountain guide last saw Jaslinda at around 7:30 a.m. After that, she was never seen again. When it became clear she was missing, a massive search and rescue operation was launched. Over the following days, more than 100 personnel from multiple agencies searched the mountain, assisted by local volunteers and indigenous trackers. Teams covered approximately 95% of the hiking area using various search methods, but despite nearly 2 weeks of searching, no trace of Jaslinda was found. Eventually, the large-scale operation was scaled down and transitioned into smaller localized efforts. Authorities later stated that investigators had found no evidence of criminal activity connected to her disappearance. As of those reports, no confirmed explanation had been found for what happened to her on the mountain. Authorities are asking people to come forward and assist with the ongoing investigation and search efforts. Hopefully, one day her family will finally get the answers they've been waiting for. A man was walking along a beach and quickly pulled out his phone when he spotted something unusual. He said he only saw it for a few seconds before it dropped out of sight or disappeared from view. When he walked over to the exact spot moments later, there was nothing there. No one else was around at the time, and he couldn't explain what he had just witnessed. Some suggested it could have been a ruptured weather balloon breaking apart in the atmosphere, and I agree, it looks that way. One commenter even said they had found something similar in a field, which seemed to support that idea. Still, it's strange that when he checked the area, there was nothing left to find. A woman in Florida was enjoying a night walk on May 25, 2026, around 10 p.m., when she noticed something unusual in the sky. It looked like a comet or meteor descending through the darkness. Then, suddenly, it broke apart. Multiple glowing fragments separated from the main object and spread across the sky. Meteor fragmentation is a well-known phenomenon, and objects entering the Earth's atmosphere can often break into smaller pieces as they burn up. But instead of simply fading away, the glowing fragments appeared to move in different directions for a short period of time, each leaving its own trail of light behind.
Oh my god!
Oh my god.
Is this real life?
Fragmentation itself isn't unusual. The way some of the pieces seemed to behave afterward sparked a lot of debate online. Now, I would love to watch some more hiking encounters.